Sifter for the ear.
News, interviews, reviews, cinema, TV, streaming. Action!
Hi y'all, this is Jerry Williams, aka TV Jerry. In February, I featured Jim Junot on my podcast about his show, Lights, Camera, Author, that features interviews with people who've written books about the movie business. His show was on WRIR for several years. He took a break, and now he's back on the air with his 300th show, airing on Tuesdays at noon. I'll include a link to his podcast on the webpage for this show at tvjerry.com.
On January 15, 1977, two men stepped into the mailbox, a gay bar in Richmond, Virginia. They pulled shotguns, fired randomly into the crowd, and fled into the night. One customer was killed and two others were wounded. The attack shook the city, but it was just one chapter in a strange tale of murder, greed, corruption, violence, exploitation, adultery, and treachery. It would become one of the FBI's trickiest, most wanted cases, and at the center of it all was Leo Koury, Virginia's own Tony Soprano, the Gay Bar Godfather of Richmond.
That was today's guest, Patrick Clark, who created and narrated a documentary about the notorious Richmond gangster Leo Koury. Whether you've heard of Koury or not, you're in for some surprises as we talk about the genesis of the documentary and how his special YouTube channel finds other examples of esoteric history.
Sifter Review of the Week.
Mid-Century Modern on Hulu. Nathan Lane, Matt Bomer, and Nathan Lee Graham play three queens, and that term is bandied about constantly. Lane's character, Bunny, owns a fabulous home in Palm Springs, and he invites the other two to move in. Already living there is his caustic mother, Linda Lavin, who's great in her last role. Toss in creators David Cohan and Max Muchnick, best known for Will and Grace, along with TV's greatest director, James Burrows. With this combo, it can't go wrong, and it doesn't, mostly. Lane has turned his campy style up to 11. Bomer plays the pretty bimbo, and he nails the first part, but his attempts to play dumb don't really land. Graham settles nicely into delivering elegant dish. Hunty, the show sometimes tries a bit too hard, especially with the gay elements. The studio audience ramps up the reactions. Even so, the series is crammed with one-liners that are usually funny, so this throwback to 90s sitcoms works more often than it fails. I gave Mid-Century Modern 4 out of 5 stars. Patrick Clark, welcome to Sifter for the Ear.
Well, thank you, Jerry.
You have this channel called the Esoteric History Channel. What's the story behind that?
Esoteric History is a YouTube channel that was established by a small group of artists. Some friends of mine and I are sort of behind all of this. We've got something around 2,000 subscribers or so as of March 2025. And we've been active for about a year. We're all big fans of history, of American history, world history, ancient, medieval, and modern, all kinds of stories, all kinds of people. I always like to tell my students, I'm a school teacher by day and an esoteric historian by night, you might say. But I always tell my students, people of the past are just like you and me, except they didn't have air conditioning.
Yeah, right.
In my stories anyway, try to get down to the humanity of what's going on in some of these lesser known events of history, right. Some of which are very close to home, in our case, here in Richmond, Virginia.
Yeah, we're going to get to the Leo Koury in a minute. I wanted to ask you first, so what is your background in film or TV?
I was born and raised here in Virginia, and I went to VCU in the 2010s.
And majoring in?
History and theater.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah, it was a great combo. So it was exclusively theater for the first 2 years. And then I had the credits and I had the interest, so I went and pursued my BA in history as well. So I finished up in 2014 and did historical work with different museums and organizations in Richmond. I was with the National Park Service for a little bit. I was with the St. John's Church Foundation over in Church Hill. Then I really sort of found my vocation, you might say, which is teaching, and currently teach in the Fredericksburg, Virginia area at a small school out here in Spotsylvania.
And you were born and raised in that area too, right?
I was. That is my hometown.
How do you find the stories that you want to cover in these esoteric histories?
I keep a notebook in my pocket, and whenever I hear something interesting or crazy or off the beaten path, and I keep a running list of things that just interest me, and the other guys on the channel as well. have similar practices. And so we collect these ideas, these stories, and we just talk about them. We think, hey, has this been covered yet in a short form documentary style on YouTube? Most of these stories have not.
As you alluded to earlier, and talking about people who haven't gotten their treatment to this level, let's move to the one that we're here primarily to focus on Leo Koury, Gay Bar Godfather. How did you find out about Leo Koury and then decide to do this documentary?
Leo Koury lived and died long before my time.
Let me just add in there that I was on the gay scene when he was around, so I do remember Leo. No, I didn't know him personally, but I do remember the stories.
So that's one of the reasons that I'm so interested in talking with you, Jerry, is because it's just sharing stories, and,
Right.
and all of this, whether it's Leo Koury or whether it's a lot of the other Richmond in the 70s and 80s culture, that's something that's always fascinated me. How did I first hear about Leo Koury? My wife and I were watching old reruns of Unsolved Mysteries.
Footnote.
Unsolved Mysteries was a mystery documentary series that ran from 1998 to 2002. Robert Stack was one of the hosts.
As a millennial, this might be a bit odd for me to say, but it is my favorite television show of all time.
Oh, wow.
Some of the cheesiness and almost campiness of the show, but also some of the darkness and the real, almost horror aspects of it too.
So obviously, being a history buff and a history teacher, I figured that's how you did your research. You just got online and just started going everywhere, going to libraries and researching it.
Basically, although there's not much about Leo Koury at the Richmond Public Library, just the internet is an enormous wealth of information, especially old, we'll say, Associated Press and UPI articles, newspapers.com. Also old broadcasts, whether it's a WTVR or some of these channels. There's a lot of media out there if you know where to go. So my wife and I were watching Unsolved Mysteries, and they did a segment about Leo Koury. And as soon as they started talking about Richmond, Virginia in the 1970s, I was glued. I was just into it.
Surprise guest drop in.
And speaking of experiences from that day and the history of that day, somebody has dropped in, as you probably know. I have surprise drop-in guest, and I have invited somebody whose name I imagine you will recognize, Mr. Ray Bentley.
Well, hello, Patrick.
Hello, Ray. It's good to hear your voice.
Footnote.
Ray Bentley made his name by creating midnight movies in the 70s and was also one of the owners of the Cha-Cha Palace. I'll include a link to my podcast with Ray on the webpage for this show at tvjerry.com.
Well, I don't know if we've ever met before, but I saw your documentary and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I sent it to 7 or 8 friends, as they did too.
Well, thank you. It means a lot, especially because I believe we quote you somewhat extensively in the show.
Yeah, tell us about your experience with Leo.
Well, Leo Koury, as I've said before, was the Jack Ruby of Richmond. He was connected to the Lebanese mob, but he coached ball, he was charitable, and he knew which police officers he could juice. And Ronnie Williams, who owned Continental Dance Studios, was also Lebanese. He was a flamboyant queen who carried it, instead of a purse, he carried around a locked bank bag. And I guess they met at the Lebanese church and decided that they would open an after-hours club because there was going to be a lot of money in that kind of thing. And they opened the 409 Club in the early 70s. I first went in 72. They had a reel-to-reel tape deck for their music. It was dingy. Half the place had a dirt floor. And we just thought Richmond deserved something better. So Wayne Cash, who had a contractor's and restaurant background, and Tony Craddock, who was a hairstylist and worked with me at one of the movie theaters, we were all friends, and we got together and decided Richmond needed something like Washington or Baltimore. So we decided to open the Cha-Cha Palace. And God, little did we know we would open up a gang war in town.
Let me ask you one thing right before we go any further, because I know in the documentary it was stated one way. It was the Cha-Cha Palace when it was on Broad Street, and then when you moved over to Main Street, it was the Club Cha-Cha, right?
Well, it was Club Fame.
Right, and then it went to Club
Cha-Cha.
Cha-Cha.
Then changed to Club Cha-Cha.
Right.
And we opened it in February 1975. It was a huge success right off the bat. No advertising, no flyers, just word of mouth. On opening night, the coat check girl made $800.
Wow.
We were both on Broad Street, and we were 4 blocks west. We were right in the VCU Gray Street area, and so cars would drive by and see long lines of our patrons coming in, and they'd yell homophobic slurs. So we try to get them in fast, but some of them would just holler back at them.
Yeah.
I was running a movie publicity office in Fredericksburg. And Leo Koury called me and posed as a doctor to get me to the phone and said, Ray, you've got to come to Richmond. I have a very important meeting and you really need to come. And I said, well, what is it about? He said, I'll tell you when you get here, you need to come and you need to come tonight. So I drove down and got there about midnight and they were playing poker in the back room of the Dial Tone.
Another gay bar in town.
And Leo pulled out a big bag. It probably had 10 grand in it. He said, name your price. I want to buy your interest in the cha-cha. I had a minority interest to begin with, 25%. I can't do that without going back to my partners, and I don't think they're going to go along with that. And so probably not. And he said, well, that's very unfortunate. You can go now. You know, it was kind of scary. But the night that you spoke about in your documentary, 1977, I was at the club when the police pulled up, and we thought, oh, shit, what's this about? Because these were the days when the ABC laws still forbade gay people from gathering together and dancing where any kind of alcohol was served or drunk. But these police officers could not have been nicer. They were just there to tell us that a deadly shooting had occurred at the mailbox. They didn't know who or why, but they wanted to give us a heads up because these were the days with Jerry Falwell and Anita Bryant, and they didn't know if it wasn't some homosexual hater going on a killing spree. And we later found a bullet hole in the glass because we had big glass panel windows in front of the cha-cha. We found a bullet hole, but we don't know when it went through, and certainly nobody was ever hurt. But Leo brought in an out-of-town shooter, and our bouncer, Chuck Kernigan, and a pal of his met the shooter at the airport, beat him up in the bathroom, and sent him back to Cleveland, wherever the hell he came from. After they sent the shooter back to Cleveland or whatever, Chuck went to Wayne and said, look, I'm going to try and work out something on this. And he went, and that's the last we heard of it. And the FBI came and talked to us about it and wanted to look at all any records that we had about Chuck and Leo. We didn't have any. And then weeks later, Chuck went missing and later turned up shot dead. So, yes, Patrick, those were dangerous days.
You know, it's interesting. I have to mention another friend of mine, ironically named Patrick, was also around in those days. His father was actually involved with Leo, and Leo actually at one point put him in the trunk of his car and threatened to kill him. He didn't, but there are lots of stories like that, Ray.
That's incredibly insane.
Well, Ray, I want to thank you for dropping in, adding a little more perspective to this amazing story of Leo Koury.
Okay, glad to be here. And Patrick, again, what a great movie you made.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for talking.
Okay.
Did you make any effort to try to talk to any of his children?
I did communicate through email with one of his daughters. Asked her if she would be interested in sort of speaking at all about her experiences growing up. And she said, you know, very politely, very nice sort of way, I would rather not. I'd rather not revisit all of this. And, you know, thinking on that, I can understand why.
Sure. Let me ask you this, because I noticed the opening reenactment, which was pretty gripping. That was not actually footage from the mailbox being attacked. Where did you get that opening footage?
That is from the Unsolved Mysteries documentary. So one of those Robert Stack recreations.
You know, and it's interesting because the sign in that recreation spells mailbox like M-A-I-L box, and actually the actual club was called M-A-L-E box. Now, let me ask you this, because as you know, I produced this documentary on Dirt Woman, and for every interview, every photo, every second of video, I had sign releases. And you've got stuff in here from Sopranos, Little Shop of Horrors, Godfather, and you just mentioned that other show. How did you get permission to use all of these sources?
Well, in as far as YouTube is concerned, this would fall under the category of fair use as well as parody. If you're cracking jokes about Leo Koury and Tony Soprano and
sure, like
and
Saturday Night
Goodfellas
Live
and
or
stuff.
something. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it all sort of falls into that category. Now, there are exceptions to this. I think in the greater context of fair use, education, and parody as well.
Now, as a producer myself, obviously I'm looking at the way something is put together. They almost feel AI created because the voiceover is very neutral. There's no pacing change. There's no music and graphics to break it up. It's just voiceover, 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 lots of pictures. Was that intentional, or is that just the way y'all ended up doing it?
I think that's just sort of the style that we've been developing. I don't think it has that touch of AI. Everybody can kind of smell that. You know, you look at a picture or you listen to a narration,
right,
and it sounds very artificial. We've tried to bring the best quality audio That's kind of what sets apart the more amateurish creator content on YouTube from the more professional stuff. Now, if
Absolutely.
NBC or History Channel or whatever puts their stuff up there, that's a completely different category. When it comes to the presentation, whether it's Leo Koury or the Cult of the Blind Pope or the Mormons or any of these other sort of stories that are a bit off, we really do try to present them as objectively as possible. It can just be presented and sort of speak for itself. And I've always valued that in historical presentation. Maybe that's my experience with the National Park Service. Although I do not speak for the Department of the Interior or the National Park Service, although they were the best couple of years of my professional history sort of public.
And of course, if you were still employed there now, you might not be employed there anyway. So,
well,
speaking of employment, do you guys monetize YouTube at all, your documentaries?
Yes. So we've had the good fortune of some success in the beginning. One of our early videos really took off. It was a video about what happened to the loyalists in the American Revolution, the 1/3 or so of American colonists that supported King George and the British Empire.
Right.
And that video it got a lot of attention. And that is what brought us into monetization and a sort of official status with YouTube. So we do receive revenue from that.
Good. Now, I know all of your documentaries at this point are short form, which is probably good because people don't have the attention span like they used to. Do you ever have the desire or the interest in creating maybe a 90-minute documentary or even longer?
I've definitely thought about it. There's definitely a whole wealth of stories that I would like to tell. It really is a collaborative effort. For example, for the Leo Koury documentary, I wrote and narrated that particular piece, but one of the other people on the team edited and brought in the video and information, the visuals. We had other members of the team who provided criticism and feedback on the script. But yeah, I've been interested in longer pieces as well.
Now, you mentioned your team that you wrote and directed this one. I noticed there are no credits at the end of the documentaries. Is that also intentional?
Yeah, we're just trying to let the history sort of speak for itself. And it's something that I think is new within the community of YouTube creators. Right, you'll have your channel, and sometimes that will be a channel like Esoteric History, where it's clearly several people. So unlike a traditional documentary, it's really something new. It's the sort of millennial and even getting into Gen Z territory here.
So you got all these documentaries you're making. When you have time to just chill, what do you like to watch? Are you a documentary watcher too, or do you have some narrative stuff you enjoy?
I'm definitely an old Hollywood kind of guy. Bogart and Bacall, Jimmy Cagney and that kind of stuff. And that's really something I got into in college. And it's always been a part of my sort of way of thinking about art, about cinema, whether it's classic film noir or old Hollywood movie musicals.
So what are you watching right now? What did you watch this weekend?
I watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off with my wife. That was last night. She had never seen it before. It used to be one of my favorite movies as a teenager and as a college student. Watching it now, a lot of the characters are not particularly likable, or they're a lot more shallow than I thought. I mean, I guess I just thought the movie was much deeper than it actually is, although it's still so much fun. The music in that film is just on point.
Yeah, well, that'll happen throughout your life, because I've had that happen to me. I'll watch something that was so crucial to me, maybe in the 70s when I saw it the first time, and I'll go back and go, okay. So it does change with your own perspective of life too. I think that'll happen with just about any piece of art.
Oh, yes. I wanted to talk about your interest. You're the king of Dirt Woman.
Or maybe the queen of Dirt Woman.
To your knowledge, did the world of Leo Koury and the world of Donnie Corcoran, did that ever sort of come to a confluence? I know you have the sort of the bar scene in Richmond, you have the sort of underground subculture, you have the Gray Street corridor, but I can't imagine Leo Koury and Dirt Woman ever running into each other on the street and that encounter being positive for either party.
I haven't. I interviewed 70 people for the documentary, and of course I still talk to people who've seen it, and they said, well, now the time I met Donnie, so there are so many stories. Leo Koury did not pop up, surprisingly or interestingly, so I don't know if they ever had any kind of encounters or not. You're right, it would be interesting, because I'm sure Donnie would just say whatever he felt like, and Leo Koury probably have that guy whacked next week.
Or he would have had someone throw him out of the mailbox.
Yeah.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the dial tone, which, as we say in the documentary, the gimmick was that every table had a phone where you could call people at other tables.
No, it didn't.
Was that the case? Really? Every article I read about the dial tone said that was the sort of come on for the customer, was that they had a phone in the middle of the table and you could call people across the room.
You should have asked Ray while he was here. I went to the dial tone. That was the first gay bar I went to when I was coming out. We're talking 1976. Maybe it did earlier, but when I was there, I don't remember any phones.
Oh, sorry. I've also heard it was called that because before Leo snapped it up, it was basically the place where all the people from Bell Atlantic or wherever go to lunch.
Well, yeah, actually, the building behind it that is now, there's a Petco and the Fresh Market, that was a Bell Atlantic building. And that's why the dial tone was popular that way, because it was right there near them. So did you get a chance to watch Dirt Woman?
I did, yes. I watched it on Tubi, I think it was.
So what did you think?
It was definitely a wild ride. It was a very earnest documentary, I think. And I think you definitely portrayed Donnie and the various people in sort of his circle, you might say, especially the family, very sympathetically. Yeah, I liked a lot of the attention that you gave to the subculture in Oregon Hill.
Well, Patrick, this has been fascinating. It was great to get even deeper into Leo Koury's story and hear about what you're doing with your esoteric history.
Yes, thank you, Jerry. It's been fun. And we've got all kinds of stories. If you are interested in the bizarre, the macabre, the off the beaten path, then subscribe to Esoteric History.
That was today's guest, Patrick Clark, who created and narrated a documentary about the notorious Richmond gangster called Leo Koury, the Gay Bar Godfather of Richmond. I'll have links to YouTube where you can watch it for free, as well as their Esoteric History channel, and my podcast with today's surprise guest, Ray Bentley. And this is actually Ray's voice coming up right now.
Coming soon. In theaters.
A Minecraft movie. This is the latest attempt to turn a popular video game into a movie, with Jack Black, Jason Momoa, and Danielle Brooks. Freaky Tales, a mashup anthology set in 1987 Oakland, California, talks about the love of music, movies, and more, from the team that created Captain Marvel and Half Nelson. Hell of a Summer. This week's horror entry is also a comedy that's set in a summer camp, starring and co-directed by Billy Burke and Finn Wolfhard of Stranger Things. Wake Up. In an attempt to draw attention to the environmental crisis, activists decide to vandalize a furniture store, but things go horribly wrong when they find themselves trapped with a hunting-obsessed night guard. The Chosen, The Last Supper, Parts 1 and 2. This faith-based film is playing both parts in the run-up to Easter weekend. Screamboat. In this nod to Disney's first animated film, Steamboat Willie, this horror flick features an evil mouse that terrifies the Staten Island Ferry, from the producers of Terrifier 2 and 3.
TV and streaming.
The Bondsman on Prime Video. Kevin Bacon stars as a bounty hunter who gets a second chance at life by hunting demons for the devil. Jurassic World Chaos Theory on Netflix. Trying to wring more money out of the franchise, this animated adventure is about a gang who tries to unravel a mystery about a global conspiracy that brings danger to dinosaurs and themselves. An Evening with Elton John and Brandi Carlile on CBS and Paramount+. This concert was filmed at the London Palladium. Devil May Cry on Netflix. A mysterious villain from the gates of hell and a handsome devil are in this animated series. Dying for Sex, based on the podcast about a woman who is diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, abandons her husband of 15 years, and begins to fully explore her sexuality, which can get kinky, starring Michelle Williams and Jenny Slate. Pulse on Netflix, yet another medical drama, this one's set in Miami, starring Jack Bannon. You can subscribe to this podcast on the usual platforms or go to TV Jerry, click on the podcast tab, and there's a link to enroll. Next week, the director of the Virginia Film Office, Andy Edmonds, will return for his 4th annual look back at the production business in Virginia last year. And yes, we will discuss the cancellation of Pharrell's movie Atlantis. This is Jerry Williams. Thanks for listening.
For more Sister, including literally thousands of reviews,
Visit tvjerry.com.
That's a wrap.